Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11, and of course we are playing as Japan. So we're going to continue this. Let's get this to a little better speed, because we're focused on just a few things. Not many battles in many places. Oh good, we're winning up there. We're going to occupy that, or reoccupy that. Okay, cluster bombs. Very good. Okay, and it's one and done. Ah, that's right. I wanted to see about upgrading some of that. We are building a couple of light cruisers here. I think we just had, yeah, a couple of destroyers come through. But we will be building more, so I want to get the tech up before we start building. I also put in a bunch of these. Are 3 police per division thingy here. But yeah, that should help with some of this. As you can see, where we have a good smattering of police, where we sent out, I mean, it's maybe a bit overkill in some spots. Maybe not. We're doing good. When I moved all these out here, I had a lot of, regular army units. But regular army units are going to be more costly, both in ICs to build and in manpower and all that other good stuff that are just unnecessary, even for not just suppression, but battling the police, because, or the partisans. Because so far, it seems, again, it's just my impressions of things. Now this is, we'll see about keeping a few of these sort of militia type, fascist militia type, that have good suppression too. What is their suppression level? 12, yeah, so it just, I think the police is 13. I was just looking at it before starting, so just slightly under a police unit, so it's, rather effective. So put them out here, and we should be able to get, yeah, 35th, we'll take that. Get much of it into the yellow state. And if there's outbreaks, fine. Oh, and I was saying, the police seem to be able to defeat the partisans if they're not attacking across a river, and or, well, looking for mountains, not attacking, particularly attacking across the river into the mountains. So just have to be a little bit smart about it and have a few, those type of divisions, and a few sort of like cavalry type stuff around for fast moving, which is, good. Quickly suppress them, and a bit better fighters. Okay, aircraft prototype evaluation. That is here. Okay, yep, we're gonna stop that. And yeah, back to cruisers. We're going to get all those done. Heavy cruisers, we may be building some of those. That's a likelihood. We also need to upgrade in here. But these are a bit quicker builders, I believe, I'm pretty sure, than your light cruisers. It's things with long lead times, like aircraft carriers, battleships. Though I'm not going to be based, and I may be making, because again, my philosophy is that particularly Black Ice has tried to do its best to simulate reality. Okay? That is my understanding of Black Ice. They're trying to do their best to simulate reality within the confines of the engine that they're playing with, the Hearts of Iron 3 engine, and their understanding of reality. How effective were airplanes at attacking ships? That kind of thing. Because at some point, late in the war, 45, we can see that ships get to the point that they can defend themselves effectively without friendly air cover, if there is enough of them in a formation. Now, effective doesn't mean invulnerable. I'm talking particularly about the kamikaze attacks. So we can see that they launched massive waves of kamikazes that I think they truly believed that they were going to be slamming into the carriers and the battleships, and after a short while of that, there weren't going to be enough carriers and battleships that weren't sinking or on a blaze of fire, that they were going to, the kamikazes were going to start coming into destroyers and, light cruisers and other things like that, just because for the want of targets. But we see sort of the opposite. Sometimes they're going after, I know at least one destroyer was hit by a kamikaze, didn't sink, killed 11 people or 20 people or something like that. It sort of, it was a Fletcher class, hit sort of amidships, above the waterline, and yeah, it eventually, it went back for repairs and whatnot, but that's out of a couple hundred people on board the vessel, or 150 people or whatever it was for Fletcher. A lot of people on military vessels, if you don't realize, crammed in there, very much so. So, that's a kamikaze that does hit, but doesn't sink a destroyer. It takes out one of the engines that from being functional. So it can, drive around. I was going to say sail, but obviously it's not sailing. It can drive around the ocean just fine, but just not at its design speed. So it's, needs to get repaired. And, goes back under its own power, just with the other engine. There's 4 boilers on a Fletcher, and it's sort of, you hit one engine room, you sort of basically take out 2 of the the boilers heat up the steam that is then run past an engine to spin them. So you take out the boilers for 2 of them, of the engines. The engines are no longer, functioning because they no longer have steam. So there's, some sort of vulnerabilities there. And I think that was the situation. So it was, on sort of half speed or something. And which is fine, like I say, for getting around. It just, if you've watched the War Thunder videos, it's not zipping around at flank speed at all. Or when it goes flank, it's just at about half speed. So yeah, so that's the kind of thing is yeah, they were still taking losses. But in a lot of those cases, had they not been kamikaze attacks, there would have been so many misses. And now, of course, you don't have to get quite as close, so there might not have been quite as heavy as losses, but there would have been a lot more misses in attack. So we can see late war Americans in a large group formation going, really worrying about it, really taking losses, hits in the carriers, hundreds of people dying, but the fleet as a whole is surviving and is fighting and is still functioning and doing its thing. And of course, there was air cover as well. So we can see the idea. Now, if you go to early war and you put on a bunch of squadrons coming down there, you start seeing a lot of ships sunk, but you still see Dunkirk happening because they were taking my understanding, and yes, I've watched the recent movie, is that yes, small boats picked up soldiers and took the soldiers back to England, but small boats did a lot more of picking soldiers up at the beach, taking them, say, a mile, half a mile, whatever it is, because it's a really shallow water there, out a ways, and unloading the soldiers onto a destroyer or other faster moving vessels, because started out with some of the channel ferries that just were slow and unmaneuverable, and loading them up and shuttling back and forth, and these guys would still be able to be out and maneuvering and not just stuck at a pier or something, so they're an easy target. So when we see that the Goering doing his best to stop that and doesn't, so how effective should air power be? But then we see air power taking out the carriers and is critical. So yeah, it's all a lot of balance issues. So I'm taking this and trying to play it with my historical knowledge. Now, somebody else may realize that, you don't need heavy cruisers because either you should build light cruisers or battle cruisers more effectively or something. There probably, if you look at the stats and do the tests, there's probably a bunch of min-max type principles that I don't know. So, not to say you shouldn't do those type of things, but min-maxing, you should if that's the way you want to play. I'm just working from the sort of historical, and we're going to switch this over to that one. Historical principles, and hoping that they, generally speaking, getting it right. Now, if you want to post below, if you think I'm doing something, we're gonna, because we're maxed out at that, and well, let's actually go a little below because we are sort of maxed out. Not hugely below. I used to do that. I used to we get too much, and I'd go to nothing. But I sort of learned my lesson on that. It's fine to work it down because anything over 70,000 or something is just damn fine. And if you want to totally stop, and if you can watch the numbers well and keep it over 70,000, the worst of the snow is over. Great, good, do so, because it doesn't harm it, I don't think, so long as you have a cushion. And I'm also used to playing with Germany and Third Reich events, as well as the other sub-mods that you need to have supplies to effectively pay for things. And so by doing so, you if you don't, things won't happen. So that's part of what I'm doing here. Okay, industrial production advance. And we're going to let that go. Naval strike tactics. Now, of course, if you get into a bad way, we're going to let that one go. Yeah, go ahead and, if you've got plenty of supplies, and that's also part of the reason, if you've got plenty of supplies and you are, say, losing a lot of transports, convoys, not the ones you transport units on, but convoys to keep your resources flowing, going for the harder to do first to get that done. It really can help, because like the Japanese, towards the end of the war, 44 and later, because remember it goes into August 45, so it goes through more than half of 45 in Japan, and the war is still very heavily going in Asia. And I say that because it's they're still heavily fighting in the Burma theater. They're still very much fighting in the China theater in 45, and the British are in 45 are attacking and trying to retake a lot of the colonial possessions. America had already come through. They got in the Philippines, I think, all done by 45. But then they're pushing, on 45 into Okinawa and places like that. So the war is still very much raging in the Pacific. And so, but even back in 44, Japan finds itself needing more steel because to build, everything, literally everything that for the war, whether it's guns, they're trying to build tanks to defend Japan. They're needing to build, there's steel used in aircraft, obviously. The critical metal is, there's actually two critical metals. One critical metal is, of course, aluminum for light aircraft frames. The other critical metal is high quality steel that you can put into an engine that can then go very, very hot because you're running it at tremendous output, as opposed to driving a truck around or something like that. Not that engines don't get hot, trust me, they do. But it's just, the high performance of those engines. But even on less high performance bits of the aircraft, you still need steel. You need steel for all of that, but they needed steel to build convoys, basically, basic transport ships, to be able to transport things like oil. Oh, and steel from Manchukuo and places to Japan to build the ships. See the problem there? They didn't have steel to build the transports, so they needed to get more steel, but they didn't have the transports to get more steel. And because Japan did not keep up building its convoys and doing that during the war periods, and also didn't escort the convoys, or if they did escort the convoys, it was very poorly escorted. And, we have a out-of-date old destroyer with poor sonar equipment, undermanned, one of these guys escorting a critical supply convoy instead of 3 or 4. And this could be just a supply convoy of 3 or 4 ships itself. But still, you put enough to make sure it gets through, because if it doesn't get through, it doesn't matter what your big surface flashy super fleet does, because if it can't go anywhere because it doesn't have any oil, it doesn't matter. So this is what Japan's Navy, and I'm going on and on about this in different times, but Japan's Navy was focused on the big decision battle or battles of the big flashy new cool units, and that's going to win them the war. But they forget the idea that that big flashy fleet needs fuel, or needs food, or needs whatever it may need, and it can't function without it. It literally can't function without it. And you may go, well, food, yeah, but if you're stuck on one of these islands out here, because Truk is sort of their major sort of out here Pacific base, yeah, they may do some fishing, and they did talk about that, especially for some of the officers, did get some nice high quality sushi and whatnot from fish captured out here, but it's in no way able to support feeding even a few of the ship's crews by what locally you can produce from here. So they're having to send, after, month after month after month, they have to keep sending transports of just food to supply the fleet out here, let alone oil. Oil you don't need if you're just all sitting in harbor and, hanging out and waiting for the battle to happen, but you need food on a daily basis. And so these ships are being sunk, because you can take a regular freighter and load in oil barrels into it. It's not as efficient as a tanker, but you can move oil or gasoline, in 50-gallon drums quite effectively. Not as efficiently, but quite effectively. And you need to put it into 50-gallon drums at some point if you're landing the stuff, even for aviation fuel and other stuff, locally onto islands that don't have good ports. And even if they have decent ports, they may not have a tank on shore in which you can run a big hose and unload fuel fast into the big tank and go away, because that big tank, even if you had one there, that big tank gets bombed by the Americans, and so dispersing a bunch of fuel dumps around the jungle / air bases, whatever you want to around the areas, and camouflage them, makes it much harder for the American pilots to see and sink this stuff. I think it was in one case they had, some of the stuff they were doing when they're coming down the slot to Guadalcanal here, the Japanese were coming down at night and then just throwing the stuff off over the sides of the ship, hoping that it would float, hoping that and it was sort of worked out, hoping that the men on shore would be able to swim out and drag, because oil drums filled with oil float because they're generally speaking, more buoyant, and some of the other stuff that was sort of packaged to go into the water, and just hoping that enough of the stuff would either, drift towards shore, and or enough men would be able to come out and drag, swimming, pushing whatever the food and whatnot ashore. That was how they were getting the stuff ashore. And some of the early, I think it was the Japanese stuff was put, early stages before the Americans were really sort of counterattacking well, put on shore, and then the Americans bombed it because it was just along the, on the open parts of the beach. And they learned that they had to get the stuff not just on shore, but they had to get it into the jungle to hide it, to keep it from being targeted. And so, this policy. So Japan for a while bases its navy out of here because here's where the oil is. And you can run some of this crude straight into the main engines of the boilers. It doesn't do it good, but it works. So you didn't have to ship the oil anywhere. And so it was basing its big fleet out here to sort of protect, you can see the Philippines or whatever, because you can't base it out of here or here because the transports were getting sunk. So it tells you the infrastructure that Japan just did not. And Japan realizes this because it sees this stuff, but it's still fixated on its big battle, and it's the power centers within the Navy, because there's, trust me, you can talk about how armies are apolitical. They can be within a country, but they are also political in and amongst themselves, as in, sort of a, shall we say, a political process as who's going to be, the next commander-in-chief of the army, or who's going to be taking over the East Front Command, or whatever. There's sort of, shall we say, internal army politics. Well, there's heavy internal Navy politics, and no one wants to give up their destroyers because the destroyers are, at minimum, useful, if not actually critical, to some of the big fleet's operations. Because if you don't have destroyers, oh, nice fat carriers and battleships out there, let's just put torpedoes in them with, from submarines, because they don't have any destroyer escorts with sonar and able to respond. So you need destroyers there, critically, but you can't move the ships. You can sort of see the catch-22 type logic I'm building here. And Japan doesn't see this early enough, and even once it does see it, it doesn't take measures to correct, to do it in an effective way. Okay, partisan suppression advanced. Very good. Here, yes, we're going to let that go. And carrier aircraft prototype advances. Very good. I think that is this one, and we're going to let that one go. We want our equivalents of zeros or better. Okay, Bank for International Settlements. We want to do that one. Hit that. And yes, you always want to take the biggest one. It has the best, most useful outcomes. Oh, we probably should be pushing in there because that's going to be the next capital if we don't. And we do have even more leadership available. Okay, well, let's do small ship engines. Ah, we actually have more production capabilities. Okay. We got these guys coming. That's a... I don't know if it's enough. But it's a reasonable amount to see how much more we need. I don't need 100% compliance. I don't need 100%, because here, if this is 3 point whatever 9 or something, but there's no resources or leadership or other factors that we don't want modified by manpower to be modified by revolt risk or anything like that. It doesn't need to be perfect. We just preferably, not that we can't deal with it, we don't want big red areas that are going to spontaneously, even without events, spawning a bunch of partisans. So I want to keep, like I say, big areas from being dark red. I don't mind, and I will maybe off camera work to make sure that all of the ICs, all of the resource centers and places like this have one directly on top of it. So if there is, from whatever means, whether it be an event, a decision, or just spontaneous mechanics, including somebody like the US or Britain, once we're at war with them, trying to generate partisan uprisings, you want to be able to win this battle without even temporary enemy occupation by the critical areas, and that's sort of what I'm looking at doing. Okay, and I'm also looking at having only moving most of these guys either to, and maybe splitting some of them up. We'll see, and sort of watching coastal provinces and critical nodes that are going to be less mobile, sort of to keep the police out moving around. Okay, small caliber tank cannons and machine guns as advanced. Okay, we want to stop that. We are doing armor piercing capped. Good. This will allow us to produce better light armor. This we did look before if you watched the earlier episodes. We got to get extra wide tracks and whatnot, and it's going to be a long time before we get a better infantry tanks. Oh, and we did need to build more. So I want to sort of see its effects instead of just spamming out more. Okay, got some of these guys coming. Oh, what are the current techs on subs? What are we doing? Okay, we are trying to improve that. That is good. How soon is that? Submarine class 4, July 39. Yeah, let's build. We want to, and I did last time, we want to have a bunch of landing craft. So I want to have a bunch of those. What are my battleship techs like? 39, 39. Thinking about this. Let's do some more aircraft that's upgradable and will be important. Okay, aircraft. Four of those and just two of these to sort of match. Do a 2-in-1. 2 naval bombers, 1 float plane combination to do that. There we go. And I've wanted to, and we have, and I think we have, I don't know if enough, but enough that I'm going to reduce this down even more. Let's go down to, let's go down to that. We don't want to go, shall we say, criminally low. But let's make sure we get some of this going. Yeah, we'll do that. They're cheaper, faster to build, and we've got a big Pacific out here, and the U.S. were right to build long-range boats so that you could base out of Hawaii and operate off of Japan with no intermediate bases. They even built some that could operate out of, you know, the West Coast and operate off of Japan. But we do have a lot of islands, and we will hopefully get more so that we can, you know, base somewhere out of here and try to cut off supplies to just some of these without worrying about. Though we may also, I do want to also be able to put subs off the California coast and see about, and or off the Panama and whatnot. And I don't know how, you know, what bases we'll get and when. So I, you know, we'll see if we'll do long range. So let's, yeah, let's do some long range as well, because some of that would be useful. So we'll do that, but we can also, you know, engage shorter ranges, and as we move, either cutting off, you know, because they've got to run convoys. So if we can sink convoys, if we sink convoys, it means whether it's the U.S. or Britain or Australia or whoever needs to, instead of build aircraft, submarines, or you know, land units, they've got to build convoys to be able to move the stuff around. So if you can kill them, it's useful. So having a few shorter range subs would be nice. Okay, so we've got those. Okay, I think we will start on heavy cruiser engines. And we could build battle cruiser too. So, yeah, let's do this. And we have a half a point almost left. I'm going to resist the temptation of doing that. I think that's just stupid and silly. Yeah, I know somebody will scream, yeah, build a super heavy battleship because they're cool. And yeah, they are really cool, but yeah, I still think they're a bit silly. Okay, and we got cruisers, so we got half a point. So let's go with armament. I'd rather have more armament than more armor. Just my basic principles, I'd rather have fast, heavily gunned ships over slow, heavily gunned ships, or slow, undergunned ship. Yeah, slow, heavily armored, undergunned ships. Just my philosophy. Doesn't mean that the others are entirely wrong, but okay, industrial efficiency advance. And yes, a good balanced approach is the best. And so, but if I've got to have 2 out of the 3 just because current, you know, if I start building, that's what currently is available, I'm going with that. Yeah, make sure you're coming there too. Okay, recon unit combined arms. We're going to stop that. And again, I'm looking for these techs that are going to be harder to, or you can't upgrade without running them back through the production cycle. I think this would probably require running through the production cycle. This this does not require that. They just upgrade naturally. I may edit the decisions. I'll just say this now. The decisions for the allowing for war on these two. I think they required Republic of Nanjing to be formed. I just may remove that requirement, keeping everything else required, just so that we're not. Yeah, I was right. This I should have been moving there before. Oh, you're being attacked? Oh, you. Oh, you don't have any infrastructure. Okay. That, no, I understand that. Now, didn't then. Two things. One, I'm trying to defeat these guys now and trying to leave them something of an army left, but I need to take the capital because we're puppeting them, so they'll get to maintain the forces that they're left with. So I'm not attacking into here. And two, if you've watched the question mark episodes, once we are no longer at war, we lose a lot of our ICs and other things because we're not at war anymore. So I'm not in a we're gonna take them out here and here, but I'm not in a super big rush to end this. If I can take a little long, not trying to stall, but without leaving them some more forces and take them out still. That's what I want to do. Okay, divisional HQs have advanced. Very good, and yeah, we'll let this go. And we can now produce more things. Okay, we've got our carrier aircraft, more carrier aircraft along with carriers. We're going to build one of these guys. These are god-awfully expensive. But I'm just thinking that having, and I'm used to from the German campaign, having one of those and either, you know, it just can't make it with the regular transports to like do a para invasion here, but I can if I've got the longer ranged, heavier ones, or same thing for air supply, whether I'm it's a situation where I'm losing too many because of submarine losses, or just I've got units trapped and doing the Stalingrad thing of air supply and having aircraft that are able to supply more stuff and longer range may just do the trick, especially from where the current air bases are. And I talked about it with a few other people at different times. The Stalingrad airlift was a complete and total disaster, any way and every way you want to look at it. But in concept, it's not a bad idea because they had done it before and it had worked, but on a much, much, much smaller scale. So keeping alive, because there was, I forget the pocket name, but it was like a division or two, not an army corps or an army group, not a complete army group. It was just a division or two or something like that. And yeah, on that scale, it works. You know, the Luftwaffe had enough air transport to keep them alive. You still needed, in the one I'm thinking of, and I forget the name of it, was on the East Front, and it was before. It was very much fighting to, got cut off, and fighting its way back to the German lines. It wasn't the idea that sort of Hitler got in, well, we'll hold out forever, and we'll, eventually next spring as it comes around, we'll have our forces and come and relieve you. No, it was immediately fighting its way out, and did so, I think, in good shape. With a lot of air supply, because it wouldn't have had ammo or fuel or maybe food. I don't know how bad the food situation. And it wasn't that long. I mean, it was a time, but it wasn't that long because they were again doing the right thing. So yeah, I'm wanting to, you know, very well use, that was land-based, right? Land-based air warning radar has advanced. Okay. Well, we'll switch this to something else. Yeah, that's useful. And radar for destroyer frigates. Okay. Here. And that we will also switch down to here to the 39 tech, more efficiently done. We'll get back to the 40 techs. Again, those are upgradable as time goes on, so having them, not having them now is basically fine, because well, because we don't need them now. We're not fighting anybody that has a navy, and we're not planning to until 41 or so, and we're gonna let that go, I think. So I know that's early enough. Infiltration tactics. Okay, how well do we infiltrate? Pretty well, but we can get better. Luxembourg is mobilizing. Ooh, all 10 of their dudes with pikes are forming up in the town square, being ready if the Nazis show up with their tanks, because those pikes will be really effective. Okay, twin engine aircraft frame. Okay, so we got that, so we'll move this down to fuel tank. Okay, we enforce puppet up here. Very good. Yes, this works really well. So I think we're going to end here. That's a good point. To end the episode, I want to thank you all for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. I really do appreciate that. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And of course, I love hearing from you. So post comments, questions, suggestions. It really helps when you do that. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.